And man, I could not be more excited to hang out with our guy Mike Renner from CBS. And Mike, let's begin here. We'll get the big one out of the way. You get to play GM for a little bit. Raiders are sitting at 6. What does Mike Renner, GM, do on the clock? Go.
I'm trying to trade up to number 1, truthfully.
Ooh,
I love Cam
spicy
Ward.
Renner.
I think the Miami quarterback is as physically gifted as any of the quarterbacks we've seen in recent years. I just think he has it. He has the calm, the cool, the whatever it takes to be a franchise quarterback at the next level. So it sounds like the Titans aren't completely sold on him. If they were, I think we would know that by now. So if it's available, I'm making a play. I think you're within striking distance. You need that guy. You need that reason for excitement. That's what I'd be doing.
So I'm glad you brought up the quarterbacks. Obviously, if you're a fan of the silver and black, that has been the conversation surrounding this team. I mean, really candidly through about halfway through the regular season. When you take a look at the class as a whole, right? You brought up Cam Ward. Obviously, so much has been talked about Shadur Sanders. What do you take as this group? Take from this group, like kind of as a collective?
I think the most interesting thing about this class is that they've played a ton of football. They're like all these guys, Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, Quinn Ewers. I think Ewers is the guy who's played the least amount of football of that bunch, and he's a 3-year starter. Everyone else is a 4 or 5. Dillon Gabriel's case, 6-year starter. We're like, there may not be a massive learning curve, as we saw like a year ago, where Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, the guys who played a lot of football in college, hit the NFL running. So while no one, I think, outside of Cam really has the high-end traits that I'd go to bat for at number 1 overall, I think uniquely in this class, there are like day 2 guys who could be, your Derek Carrs, who ended up starting right away for the Raiders, your Andy Daltons, who are, maybe not the most physically gifted, but could end up starting on their rookie deals for you. So I think it's a good class of day 2 quarterbacks, not a lot of guys who are like surefire, top of the draft guys that we saw a year ago.
And you look at what Pete Carroll has done throughout his career is he's won a lot of football games without a, air quotes, day 1 type quarterback. So when you brought up these day 2 guys, what about that crew? You brought up the Gabriels, the Shucks, the Jackson Darts of the world. Like, from that kind of crew, who do you like? What do you like? What intrigues you in 2025?
I really like Dillon Gabriel.
Go Ducks.
And I'm not just saying that because you went to Oregon, but I have him as my quarterback 3 in this draft class. 1, because he's every single stop played good football. Similar to like Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix last year, where like he went to different offenses, went to different locations, and all he did was play well. And like he hit the ground running as a true freshman at UCF. He has Hawaii's passing record as a high schooler. His dad was a college quarterback. Like, this guy knows the position inside and out and has played a ton of football. Really, the only knock on him is that he's 5'10 and a half. Like when you can get past that, and obviously Pete Carroll got past that with his starting quarterback in Seattle for a long time, I think you have a really good NFL quarterback. Maybe not an elite NFL quarterback, but a guy who can play better than obviously we've seen for the Raiders in a few years now. So he's the one where I'm like, I just think he's knows how to play the position inside and out. And yeah, there's going to be limitations when you're short. I think you're seeing that with Bryce Young. You see that with Kyler Murray. You saw that with Russell Wilson. But you can still lead a good offense if you have the pieces around you.
It's interesting, too, because I mean, I've had this conversation with Eric Allen, with Lincoln Kennedy, our in-house guys, our analysts, and they've both said the same thing to me, which I found really interesting, is they said, we're kind of in this era now where we have to reframe the way that we look at quarterbacks. So you go back 5 years, and you're like, oh, man, this guy was in college for 4 years, 5 years, you got to stay away. And they're like, no, like, we need to collectively, as an NFL fandom, say it doesn't matter if a guy was in college for 6 years, the way the NIL situation works now. Like, and to your point, guys that have gone out and played. Now, look, there's a clear difference between a guy who was in college for 6 years, had 4 different stops, and with all due respect to the Pop-Tarts Bowl, ended up there 4 times. But compared to a guy like Gabriel, who has had success every single stop. So have you kind of had to have that reframe as well with the way you look at the quarterbacks in particular?
I do think that I have trended more towards guys who have played more football. I think it's not necessarily
the Bo
about
Nix effect a little bit. Yeah,
about the amount of time, but it's just about the amount of reps that a guy's gotten. And your Zach Wilsons, your Trey Lances are kind of the red flags in that, where they played Trey Lance 1.5 years, Zach Wilson 1.5 years. It's like you need to develop at the position or at kind of like the time frame and against the competition level that you're at. And you need to gain that confidence and master that level before you move on to the next level. And so seeing guys who have developed a mastery is something that I trend more towards now. Guys who don't have as many things to fix. Like, you saw Caleb Williams come out last year, and everyone pre-draft said, like, there were things to fix about his game. And you don't always go to the situation where either they have the quarterback to fix it, or maybe there's things that you need to fix about your game that are almost innately part of you that it gets more difficult to do at the next level when your head's spinning with a new playbook and a new supporting cast. So I'm trending more towards the guys who have showed, again, like the mastery at this level of football. Maybe not necessarily guys who have all these high-end traits but haven't figured it out yet.
Kind of philosophical question, Mike, right? Obviously, the Raiders coming off a 4-win season, so much new in 2025. And yes, so much is going to be discussed about the quarterback, as it should be the biggest question, for this team going forward. But, philosophically, if you're team building, take the quarterback out of it because it's the obvious, yes, you need to have that guy for the next 10, 12, 14 years. Where do you begin if it's not the after the quarterback, this is the position you have to have figured out to be successful in the modern NFL?
I think it's offensive line. And the good news is the Raiders probably have the best offensive line since, the year they went to the playoffs,
yeah,
right?
16, yeah.
They are finally building it the correct way, or we're building it the correct way. Obviously, right tackle is maybe your only position where you're like, we'll see. DJ Glaze, good for a rookie, but he was still a third rounder for a reason, so we'll see how he ends up developing. But that's the position where, we've seen, whether it's Eagles with Jalen Hurts, whether it's, like the 49ers and Brock Purdy, you can get a later round quarterback to play better if they have a lot of time. Or you can get an early round quarterback to play horrible if they don't have any time. That's really, I think in today's NFL, especially with the way teams are blitzing, stunting, all this sort of stuff that they're throwing at your offensive lines, if you have an offensive line that doesn't know what they're doing, you're just SOL. It ain't going to happen. You're going to have a tough time making the playoffs.
One of the things that I love when we have you on is you make me a little bit smarter. So let's zoom out on this draft class in totality, just big picture, areas of strength from this class when you take a look at it as a whole.
I think defensive end pass rusher is probably the most loaded. It has one of the most athletic first rounds of any defensive end class I can remember. There's so many guys who are going to blow up this combine. And then even into day two, there's just a lot of guys where usually day two is not where you find top-end pass rushers. But in this class, I'm like, there could be some guys that are really good players in second and third round coming off the board. So that position, tight end is next, probably in terms of strength of draft class. Obviously, for the Raiders, that doesn't matter. I don't think you're drafting tight end, so I won't harp on it too long. But then running back, which obviously I think for the Raiders is something that they would want to prioritize. There's just so many. The amount of guys, I think I counted up 12 guys who would have been in my top 5 in last year's class. Top 5 running back rankings in last year's class. So it's just so much better a class than we saw last year. I think you could see double-digit guys go before day 3, which in today's day and age just doesn't happen anymore. So it's a very, very good running back class.
Again, and going back to kind of what Pete Carroll has done historically, this is a dude who has made no bones about wanting to run the football. And so, again, zooming out and looking at the league as a whole, you look at what Saquon did, Josh Jacobs, guys like that. Derrick Henry, is the running back back? Has it returned? Because it feels like it was on hiatus for a little bit. But now, again, you look at these teams playing in December, January, and February. They all run the ball, and they all do it at a really high level.
I do think Jacob's success, Henry's success, and obviously Saquon's success is going to change teams' minds a little bit. Maybe not necessarily to giving top dollar to running backs in free agency because, we'll see how long they last, but definitely to prioritizing that position. So I don't know in this year's class if we see a change because there's so many, because it's like, you're looking at maybe Ashton Genty or Marion Hampton in the first round. You're like, I can get a guy in the second who's good too, or the third who's good too. So maybe not in this year's class, but I do think you'll see a reprioritization of the running game, which comes with prioritization of offensive line and running backs.
Love it. So before I let you go, though, I always love playing this game. Give me a guy, Mike Renner, that you just like, a Mike Renner kind of guy. I don't want a day 1 guy. I don't even want a day 2 guy. Give me someone that 4 months from now I can tell my buddies, say, hey, Renner teed me off. This is the dude. Keep an eye on him going into camp.
I love David Walker from Central Arkansas.
Love it. Here we go.
I will bang the table for this guy. He's 6 foot tall. He's 267 pounds, defensive end. Now already, that size is weird, right? That's not a NFL defensive end. He would be the second shortest defensive end in the NFL. The other guy, Dennis Gardeck, who's shorter, is like a pass rush only sort of guy. But you watch his tape at Central Arkansas, no one can block this guy. You watch him at the Senior Bowl, no one can stand up to his bull rush. He was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list. They said he reportedly ran a 4.59 at that size. We'll see what he does at the combine, but he's very explosive. And you talk to any offensive tackle, the guys they hate to block the most are the guys who are 6 foot, 6'1", who always have that leverage advantage. So I think he's going to be a guy that maybe goes day 3, maybe goes back in the 3rd round, but I think he outplays that when it's all said and done.
I love it. Well, dude, this is such a money time of the year for you. We love having you on, making us a little bit smarter. Where can our friends find you and all the incredible stuff that you're producing these days?
You can find me on Twitter at Mike Renner _ or follow Pushing the Pile podcast or With First Pick podcast on CBS. I'm on both. With First Pick's more draft focus, Pushing the Pile's more NFL focus. So.
Love it. Well, dude, like I said, it was so good to see you. I'm glad we got to connect in person for the first time in a minute. You're crushing it, dude. Keep doing your thing. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Thanks for having me.